Hello, everyone, and welcome to Toka. Today's topic is race talks in the workplace. So, as everyone is so very much aware of what's going on in America since Memorial Day weekend, kicking off with George Floyd's murder, there have been a lot of changes that we're seeing in America. A lot of people, a lot of CEOs even are being called out and getting fired from their jobs. Employees are getting fired. Some woman's dog she adopted was taken from her and, so, of course, given back. But this has led to a lot of businesses and companies and workplaces that are now having discussions about race as if it just appeared like yesterday. But my job has decided to talk about it as well. They have recently decided to recognize and observe Juneteenth. Now all I need is for them to take away Columbus Day because that man was no saint. But I want to talk about my workplace experiences. So it all started with yesterday, last night, when I received an email from my lovely boss, very nice man, and he means well, but it was an email about how they were going to send out, basically they gave us homework about reading about watching a documentary, 13th on Netflix, good stuff. I haven't watched it yet. But as the sole Black person on that in that group, it's a little uncomfortable. Granted, I am first generation, so there is a little bit of removal from African Americans specifically, but I still firmly believe that African American is still African. We're all from the same place. But it's uncomfortable, to say the least, about how to talk about, like, how am I going to say, like, hey, I already live it. I don't think I need to watch it again. Like, how much more emotional damage can we take as a people? And then how can we discuss it? I don't feel like discussing. I'm not going to go and sit in an academic setting and discuss what people should have already seen. And so, of course, then it was brought up in a meeting that they're like, hey, so who would be okay with doing this? And I kid you not, there were crickets. All of the white folk were waiting for my response about what we should do, if we should watch this and discuss it later. And I just didn't say anything. I just had to turn off my monitoring and be silent.
So did they say that your research team, everyone in your research team should watch it and that you guys are going to have a discussion about it afterward?
Yep, yep.
Yikes.
Yeah, I'm sorry,
That's
but I'm like that's a no-go for me. Like I could barely, I mean, I'm sure, do you remember the times when we were younger in grade school when they would talk, whenever they would talk about slavery and then all the white kids would turn and look at all the black kids?
Yeah, that's a bit uncomfortable considering you're the only black person in your research group. I would
The
feel
only
really
one.
uncomfortable. And I understand that
It's
we're currently
super
working
uncomfortable.
remotely right now, and it's a little bit easier than being in person, but at the same time, I would still feel quite uncomfortable coming together and discussing like whatever film they recommended for everyone to watch, especially when it relates to like black people and like racial inequality and stuff like that. I can definitely
Exactly.
like
I'm like, there's certain things where I guess like I could see like I'm sorry, like for me, like those are when it comes to things like that, like usually I can think on the fly, but for something like that, I'm like, that's just so the topics of racial disparities and already looking at like what in the continent of Africa, what people go through between like black on black crime, between the Caribbean, what people go through with black on black crime, with Americans going through black on black crime, plus black on black crime on top of against every other race, because every
yeah,
other race views black people as less than. And also,
yeah.
I mean, even with the divisions that are between African Caribbean and African American,
hmm
like even with those other races, they view us all as one. They just see black and then
Exactly.
they fear that.
Yeah, so
But
just
with it's just
mhm.
it's too much. There's too it's I think people don't realize, like, I understand white people, they want to discuss it and that's, they want to talk through it, but I'm just tired of talking about it. We already live it.
Yeah, so
That's just like
basically,
trauma.
yeah, so if they weren't, trying to actively change, change, make changes at work and talk about like racial, like discrimination and all like racial inequality, like I guess maybe we would complain. And if they do want to talk about it, we still kind of say, is this really genuine? Like, is this, like what are their motives behind them doing this? For that, for example, I can
That's
definitely
true.
relate to you. I can relate to you in the fact that I'm one of the only two black people in my research group as well. And while my research group don't, I wouldn't consider them racist or anything, but at the same time they do have like some racist tendencies, if that's like the correct term. For example, they're a little bit more ignorant when it comes to like, black, like being black and being especially the only black person in like a work environment. It seems like you almost have to like be the spokesperson for all black people, and that
I
in
don't want, and I'm
itself.
tired of it. I like, especially as the resident one, because the thing is that, like, at least for like the group I work in, I can genuinely say that the people in that group, I don't, I mean, at least from what I see, I don't think they have any racist tendencies. If they have any prejudice, trust me, I don't, I legitimately don't see it. And I like, good on them. But I feel like it's one of those things that I understand he felt the need to speak on it, and I appreciate that. But I feel like, I mean, I guess it's uncharted territory for them too. They're trying, like, I think he is trying to see, okay, like, what is a way that we can help facilitate discussion. But I think it's just why sometimes it's like maybe we don't, the best way may not be to discuss this in a workplace. There's certain things that, workplace professionalism, I don't want to discuss that there. I do want to be respected and understood, and I don't want to be treated differently because of my race. But
Mhm.
I think that, it's just like work on it on your own. Like watch that by yourself and change yourself. We don't
Yeah.
have to go and almost force like, because how do I know? What if some people are not interested? What if some people in the team really do have some prejudice, that like underlying prejudice, and they talk about it? It's going to mess up the team if we discuss it and I start
Hmm.
seeing their prejudice. If they, because they will inevitably, it's the reality. They will say the wrong thing, not because what either because they're racist or because they literally they don't know. They don't mean to be, but
Exactly.
they will say the wrong thing no matter what. When you have high expectations, no one can ever meet your high expectations. So if you're a white person and if you're saying, okay, we're going to discuss this thing, you better have all the right answers. Otherwise, please don't discuss it because you're just going to offend somebody.
Yeah, so someone actually did raise this concern, saying that a lot of white people are also afraid to speak out because they're afraid of saying the wrong things. So I was just like, then that just like it's up to you to do your research and know like what you're supposed to say before you say it. But at the same time, like I'm grateful that our university is like trying to, allow people that opportunity to learn about like racial inequality and trying to make sure like they change that in the workplace. But at the same time, I feel like it's being too pushed, especially like it's being
Yeah.
pushed to people who are a lot of people, believe it or not, are don't really care. If they really truly told you their opinion about like black people, about all this like race wars and everything, you is that they don't really care. But the problem I have is like these people will pretend they care and they'll pretend to be sharing their opinions and stuff like that, but you don't really know what they're thinking behind closed doors, what they're saying behind
Mhm.
closed doors. I guess that's where my problem lies. It's like I'd rather know who you truly are when you're not at work versus what you're actually saying at work just to please someone or just to make someone feel included. Because then
And
in
that's the
that
thing,
way,
because that's where I'm like, I do see, and that's where I commend my research team, because in all honesty, like they never did any, like the ones that are there now, there's some that
mhm,
left that I could say some things about, but the ones that are currently there, that I
yeah,
currently work with as of today, they have never done anything to make me feel less than as a black person. I can say that with complete genuinity, 100%. They've never like, if anything, they've been treating everyone equally, and it's it's a great place to work in with them specifically. I mean, of course, there's the things like when I change my hair, all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, new hair," and I'm like, "Okay," but like with different like at least I can genuinely say that they've been genuine. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, I appreciate what they did. I think that, you know, to me at least, they
Yeah.
don't need to go and say like, "Hey, let's discuss
Yeah, like
this documentary." I don't think they had to. I feel like this is to me doing too much, and maybe this is one of those things. I don't know if like as basically the resident spokesperson in this team, if I'm supposed to say, "Hey, like sometimes we don't need to discuss it day in it like Black people, we don't feel the need to discuss it with other people day in and day out because it can get emotionally draining and exhausting. But I
exactly.
appreciate the fact that you want to learn. It's just that
Mm-hmm.
Black people, we have the burden of always having to educate people, and at this
Exactly.
point, I don't feel like doing it, and I just don't feel like discussing it. Like it just brings chills to me. And then it's
Yeah,
true. And then so I that's the thing. I just can't do it. I really
yeah,
can't.
it's tiring. It's really tiring always having to explain yourself. Like, never really, most people in my research environment and my workplace are quite, genuine. Most, not all, most. But I still find myself feeling like I have to, like, change who I am. Like, I can't be fully my black self, basically, at work, you
Yeah.
know? Because, like, people don't,
And
it's
that's
not like
I'm like,
they're
and that's why I'm
racist,
like,
but
we
they
need
don't
acting
understand.
careers. Like, where's Hollywood? Because honestly, it's like you have to code switch. You have to uh
Exactly.
perm your hair for it to be
Hmm.
presentable and professional. Like even like, and granted, like natural hair, like when gelled back, like yes, it's a nice hairstyle and different things, of course. But like the fact that like so many professional hairstyles have to be like, oh wait, make sure our natural hair is like pulled back. It can't be like out and about
Exactly.
and different things because it's gonna be too wild.
Exactly.
Or like,
Yeah.
like for instance, like do we feel comfortable enough to wear, for instance, African prints to work?
Exactly. Or
Or
the
will people like, yes, they'll be in awe of like, oh, that's a beautiful print,
hmm
but then they'll be like, ah, wow, that's so exotic that it like, gosh, like
exactly.
just
They'll
sometimes
probably
I
say,
find
oh,
myself trying to dress so plain.
it's like they're gonna find it too bright colors. I'd be like, okay, how come you're not wearing like neutral colors, this and that? Because like African print is quite bright and quite colorful. So it's like,
Hmm.
can you actually wear that? And then there also been people who complain that their workplace like doesn't allow them to wear dreadlocks, so some people won't be hired. And I think this has probably happened to a lot of people who wear like dreadlocks and like who wear like
Hmm.
their natural hair, but then they kind of use the excuse of, oh, you do not have enough experience for this position.
Mm.
But then in other ways, they're actually eliminating you because of how you look and because of your hair and like what you wear and the way you speak, you know? So definitely, I feel
And
like
that
those
and that
things.
and that's like appearance has always been such a big thing. Like, we always try and put our best foot forward. Like that's how it is on like interviews, first dates, like when you first day of school, different things. Like it's all an appearance, but it's so
Yeah,
much more like, and everyone suffers that, but it's so much more when you're Black. Like you have to make sure, okay,
exactly.
I actually look there's almost extra emphasis that you need to make sure you're extra put together
Exactly. It's just like
so
you
that you
feel.
can prove you always have to prove yourself, and I'm just tired of having to explain and prove myself.
And you're always like kind of like, because they're like there's this hierarchy or whatever, and they're just like your boss or whatever. It feels like you always have to like beg for their validation in some type of way. So first you have to beg for
Mhm.
validation because you're an employee, then you have to now beg for validation because you're Black. And it's just like, for me, whenever I do my hairstyles, I'm thinking about work for like the first time in my life. I'm thinking about work and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna be suitable for my work. And I even had a friend that she did she did crochet braids, and they were quite like big and stuff like that, and her mom said that she should remove it before she starts work because in the workplace they're not going
Mm.
to have it. And these were really nice crochets, but they were quite big. So it's just like the mom's like, no, no, that's not professional in the workforce. You need to get a wig that is like a straight wig that they would just like approve of and whatever. And I think that's the
Like
problem with like
something that looks like them.
that looks like them. So like, and I think that's the problem with like the past generation, like the generation before us. It's like they had to prove themselves. They had to try so hard to conform to this society and to change themselves. So it's hard, it's difficult for them to see us trying to break that narrative, trying to change that, and actually try our best to be our true selves, even if it's still really difficult. Because our parents' generation, they just did whatever it took to like get a job and to make money. They would get people would be racist to them at work. Especially, I'm Nigerian. My parents are Nigerian. They, people would make fun of our accents. Like they'll make fun of different things, but they had to just take it because this was a job that paid bills. You know. So I'm glad that our generation we're changing that. We're trying to change the way people see us and trying to be fully ourselves, even though we can't really
Yeah.
always be truly ourselves. It's gonna like take
And
a
that's the
lot
thing,
of
we
work.
still can't. That's the thing, because
Yeah,
even then, like right now, even natural hair, a lot of people are doing it not even because, like, because it's difficult, honestly, to maintain some natural hair. Like, if you have type 4 hair, it's difficult to maintain. But
yeah,
then at the same time, it's just like, are we doing this because, I wonder, are we doing this because we want to, or are we doing this to prove a point?
exactly.
Like, and that's the thing. It's just like, because if we wanted to, in all honesty, then like technically people have a freedom to relax their hair or not. The thing is that, like,
exactly.
are we doing this because, like, are people wearing natural hair because they have to prove to
White
to
people that is
non-black
really
people that we will not be oppressed, or are we doing this because we want to? And I'm
exactly.
like, I feel like every basically every step that a black person takes, it always comes down to a psychological cause of proving yourself.
Exactly. It's just I do now that you've said that I've kind of I'm thinking about that differently now. It's kind of like we're trying to say tell them like, oh look, our hair is good enough. And then like that's why a lot
Right.
of people go natural when they see other black people who are not natural, who wear wigs, weave, or like straighten their hair, whatever. They get so offended and so hurt by it because they're like, you're a betrayer. You need to like wear your natural hair so we can prove to these people that our hair is good enough. It's like we're always trying so
Hmm.
hard to prove to other people that we're good enough, and it's really sad. It's kind of like we
It's
have
it,
like
like, it
self
takes too much out of
syndrome.
you.
Exactly, it's draining. This is Stockholm syndrome because we're always trying to like. It's like we're mentally enslaved to think that these people because we're always trying to prove to them and try to like get them to validate us. In a way, we think that we see ourselves as equal, but in a way, we're still looking at them as more like we're putting them on a pedestal because we're trying so hard to prove something to them. How many times do they try hard to prove something to us? You get? So in that
And
way,
like,
we're
at the
also,
most, what they may try to prove is that they're not racist. And at
mhm,
that point, when they do that, sometimes it's just like, I feel like you don't have to prove what you already are, is what I believe.
exactly. Like if you're
Because if
black,
you're like, to me, I'm like, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm not racist, I have a black friend. Like,
exactly. That's
okay,
no, that's not proving to me that you're not racist. You can be married to someone black and still be racist. I hate when people use
exactly.
that whole I have friends that are, black friends and I'm not racist,
Because
this and
guess
that.
what? Slave owners, they did sometimes take like African wives,
Exactly.
and they had mixed
Exactly.
children, but
Because
they still mistreated their slaves.
exactly. But yeah, that's as I was saying, that's all they have to prove to us. The world already thinks that they're smart. The world already thinks that they're good enough. Their hair is good enough. They use
Hmm.
Eurocentric
Like, we
look
have to
is
prove that our
better
hair
than
can
like
be beautiful. We have
authentic
to
look.
prove that we can
Mhm.
do well in like
Can
prestigious
do
settings,
well.
in academic
And
settings. We have to prove that
mhm,
we're not just sources of entertainment, that we actually can be
exactly.
intellectual.
Always have to prove something. And what I honestly hate, I'm grateful that, like a lot of places are more like inclusive, this and that, which is amazing. But honestly, I'm so sick of that whole the first black person to be the black bachelor, the first black person to like
And
it,
I'm sorry, but I don't trust that at all. Let's
I
talk
don't
about The
trust
Bachelor,
it.
because they
It's
did that,
like
and I'm like, why have you taken how many? I mean, I don't even watch it like that, but I'm like, why did it take so long? Because yes, they had a black woman. I'm like, if you really want to make change, you better make that an all, like, for the Black Bachelor, make it an all black cast then, because
exactly.
for real that man is gonna go and choose a black woman. I mean, he's gonna go and choose a white woman to be with. Not
Like
to say
for
interracial relationships aren't are bad or anything like that, but I'm like, why are you doing this now? Like, I feel like all the changes now, why couldn't you have done that later? Or like, why
Exactly.
couldn't you, I mean, earlier, why couldn't you have done that earlier? Why do we have to do this? And I understand this is a part of change because,
Hmm.
we had slavery, we had the abolishment of slavery, we had the civil rights movement, and then there were changes. We have this movement, and there are changes that are happening. It's going to be in history books. I mean, 2020 as a whole, because it's years a mess. It's going to be
Yeah.
in history books. But like, why? I'm just like, to me, like, I'm trying to find the balance of being grateful but still progressive, like I'm grateful that that there were people that are aware of this before George
Hmm.
Floyd. I'm
Yeah.
grateful that people were aware of this before Trayvon Martin. I'm grateful for
Exactly.
that. And I'm grateful for
Yeah.
the changes and the real allies out there. But
Hmm.
still, I'm grateful that there's people that are, if you were racist all of like yesterday, and probably still are, to be honest, but you're trying to work on that and change. I'm grateful
Hmm.
to you for changing that. But I'm just also trying to understand that why people woke up on Memorial Day weekend and saw, oh, wait, like, why does it have to be some academic debate to understand what is happening to a group of people is wrong? Like, why is
Yeah.
it that we have to watch this documentary to prove that what has been going on is wrong? Like, why is it now that people have to look at that? How did you not see that beforehand? As medical professionals, how are you not aware of racial disparities? As lawyers,
Yeah.
how are you not aware of how disproportionate it is for Black men specifically to be in prison? As law enforcement officers, how are you not aware of who you're arresting and how many Black men have been slain by police officers? Like, how are you as a neighbor not aware of what you see in the news? If you're American, you should have known this way back when, and especially when Trump was elected. Like, it doesn't, I just don't see how could you have been asleep for so long and not seen this.
What?
I'm not even like, I'm first generation. I have Caribbean roots. So like,
Mhm.
to me, like Juneteenth, I signed the petition in solidarity with my African American friends because I understand what they were going through.
Mhm.
I signed those petitions back as early as middle school when probably my middle school signing didn't matter. But I signed them
Mhm.
in solidarity because honestly, like my Independence Day is already over like my country's Independence Day is already over a holiday, so we already had the day off. But like,
Yeah.
why is it that now America is all of a sudden like, are you do is it are they doing, like, it's tough because when people are doing this now, as you were mentioning, I don't know if it's genuine or if they're trying to save face.
And you know what this actually proves to me? I think a lot of people have been fake this whole time. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like remember after like those integration, like after segregation, like everyone was quote unquote integrated. I think a lot of people tried so hard to play safe. So they weren't really saying how they were truly feeling about black people. They were truly feeling about minorities and everything like that. So they weren't saying anything because they didn't want to like get in trouble or anything like that. But the problem is these people have been closet racist, for example. Like they've been closet racist for such a long time. And it's like now everything is coming up in the forefront because of what is happening. Like it's really showing people's
Mm-hmm.
true colors. You get what I mean?
And Trump
So a
gave
lot of
and
people,
Trump gave them a voice.
exactly. And Trump gave them that voice that they never had before. You would never see a racist person come out and just be, bold enough to say, like, I don't like these group of people, they're thugs, they're this and that. But because of that voice that they have received from Trump, they're freely and like confidently able to like express their opinion about us. So it's kind of like this is just opening my eyes to like the racism that has been existing that has just been hidden, not because it wasn't actually there. So like because we're talking about this, I'm now tracing back and thinking back to like my childhood being in like high school and stuff. I'm like, okay, maybe that was racist, or maybe because I wasn't aware because I was just like, okay, everybody's like kind to each other, nothing is happening, everything is good. But now it's just making me go back and think about a lot of things. You get? Because back then, no
Yeah.
one was really saying anything. If people were racist, people would not say a single word. Like no one would say anything. The most they would do is like say stuff at home behind closed doors. But when they came
Mm-hmm.
out, when we went to school, did everything, no one would say a single thing. But now
Nope.
everyone is like bolder, and everybody's like
Like,
well
and
able
that's the
to
thing.
say,
People,
well,
exact, and that's the thing. I'm just like, people have been dying though, but no one said
mm-hmm.
anything.
Exactly.
It's just
But the difference is camera phones. That's the thing. Before people were dying and
mm,
no one knew. And also people were dying, black people were getting arrested and put in the criminal system or whatever, and then they were innocent, but no one knew that because there weren't any cameras to prove anything. So that's why you see a lot of black people in prison, incarcerated, because there wasn't that proof. There weren't anything on camera to prove that person's innocence. Because I just read an article about this person who basically has been in prison for 60 years for something, a crime he did not commit. But because he was black and there's not like that evidence of okay, like all these things, like he didn't have anything to prove his innocence. He spent 60 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. And because of that, he will be stigmatized, for example, because people assume that he's a criminal, he's this and that. And he didn't do any of that. Just like the whole George Floyd situation. Do you know that $20 bill was actually real?
goodness.
The $20 bill was real. It's because
Are
the
you serious?
cashier assumed that it was fake. So he called the cops. Now he's like apologizing. He called the cops because the machine was detecting it as being a fake bill. But the $20, even if it was a counterfeit bill or whatever, it was like a
No one
fake
needs to
bill.
die because of a
He didn't
counterfeit
need to
bill.
die because of $20. Even honestly, for me, even if it was a fake
They
million
need to
dollars, no
rewrite some laws
one.
because I'm sorry, but I'm like, if it's going to be just to go on with the topic of counterfeit bills, okay? Like, I say that if you are going to use a counterfeit bill, then you shouldn't go to prison. I think you should be fined for the amount of money you were planning to use. So
Hmm.
let's say if it is counterfeit, $20, then okay, your punishment is that you have to pay actual $20. That's it. And then if you're going to use a
Exactly.
counterfeit
Or
million, then you better pay off
yeah,
that million. That's what it. You do not
exactly. I
deserve.
don't think
First off, you definitely don't deserve prison time, and you definitely don't deserve to
exactly.
be killed.
No life is worth money, you know? It's kind of like it's kind of like for me, because he died because of $20, just like so that's what they thought his life was worth. $20.
Oh my
And
gosh.
now the cashier is really regretting calling the cops because now he feels that he has blood on his hands.
Well, he does. He
And
doesn't need to
honestly,
feel like he does. He does.
well, I don't know if I would blame him because that's what he was instructed to do. Like if he sees like something is like quote
Actually,
unquote
yeah, no,
counterfeit
that's true
bill.
because he didn't technically he didn't racially. I mean, we can't say that he
Hmm.
racially profiled. It was the
Exactly. He
machine. It
didn't.
was the
He didn't.
machine.
It was the machine, and he was hired by that store, and that's what he was instructed to do, and he just went by instructions. But then, unfortunately for
Yeah.
him, he didn't know this would be the outcome of it, and now he has to hide, and that's sad. Imagine you being the person who was the cashier working there, and that's what they told you. Can't just say, okay, you have a supposedly counterfeit bill, but it's okay, I'll just bring you up. You have to report that because that's what they told you to do. But he didn't know that this person was going to die because of a $20 bill. And now he's in hiding. It's truly sad,
Uh,
honestly. But then it goes to show you that a lot of people, not all from other races, think that we are subhumans. Like they don't see us as equal. There was a study conducted that a doctor said that over 80% of like study participants said that they felt like black people felt less pain. So then because of that, there's like racial bias in the healthcare setting. There's racial healthcare, like health disparities among races because of like their biases about us.
mm,
So they basically assume that we feel less pain and they see us as like we're not really suffering as much as other races are. And that's a huge problem. If you think that problem is here now, imagine how it was back in the 90s, back in the 80s,
I
where
know, and
black
that's
people
the
were
thing that
probably
I'm telling you. We were born during the right time because I can't
exactly,
imagine. Like, I'm barely pulling it
imagine,
together, knowing the history of it and living in like
exactly.
honestly, because what's happening now? is really nothing. I mean, granted, like being up north, what's happening now is nothing, but like being in the south with the KKK on every corner, that's, I feel like you're still permanently in like the 1970s. But I'm sorry, that scared me. I
Yeah.
can't imagine. I really like, and the thing is like there's certain things that people don't have to think about.
Yeah.
For instance, like when like I always wanted to take a cross country road trip. I really did. And one time we did drive we drive not that far honestly, but I always wanted to take a cross country road trip. But I always
Hmm.
like I remember I was thinking about it, I'm like, but where is it safe to go? Like basically
Exactly.
across the coast, like once like East Coast aside from honestly like Virginia and the Carolinas, and honestly, like if you're not in Philadelphia, the rest of Pennsylvania is scary. That's like Confederate country. But like across
Yeah.
the rest of America, it's pretty scary to drive through. Like, how do you know where to stay? Because that's where it's a more homogenized population of white people, less minorities, and you don't know how they're going to treat you. So you don't
Yeah.
know what's going to happen between East Coast and West Coast. You don't know what's
Yeah.
going to happen between the North and the South. I like
Yeah.
in the South, the only places that I'd ever like I went to New Orleans.
Hmm.
That's I think that's the and I went to Disney World. Like those are the only places in the South that I've been to. But I can't
Hmm.
imagine going to like for instance like Tallahassee. Like no way. I'd go to maybe Atlanta or Miami or something, but that'd be it. That would be the only place in the South that I'd go that I'd feel comfortable and that I'm not going to run into the KKK on my doorstep.
Exactly. And then also even taking like a cross country like road trip or whatever, you need to be careful. There have been two incidents of so one person their car broke down and they went to knock on someone's door to get help and the person shot them down. And then another
Seriously,
person,
a knock. Just don't
yeah, and then
answer.
yeah,
How
it was
many
a
times?
knock because
Maybe did you do this as a kid? Like when you were home alone and people would knock on the door, you just hide.
oh yeah, I did that. Like I remember kind of
See,
doing
like
that.
that's what you
Yeah.
do. Like
Yeah, so we got
even now
yeah,
as an adult, sometimes I still hide because I'm like, oh,
exactly.
I don't know who's coming.
Yeah,
But
and then
like,
another person got into an accident and they went to the closest like they were in like the middle of it was the middle of the night in the middle of nowhere and they went to knock in like the closest house next to them and they also got shot too. And then these two people said that they shot them in self-defense. And there's no way of proving whatever happened because there were no cameras. It's really dangerous, especially being a black person, because they automatically see you as a threat without you even saying anything.
it's just like, and that's the thing. I forget. Oh, it was an amazing. There's this movie I had watched. I think a few last year. I think it was last year or a few years ago, called The Hate You Give. It's a
Yeah.
book turned into a movie with Amandla Steinberg or something like that, and the dude from Riverdale. But when there was one thing that they had mentioned, which is it was Issa Rae's character in it. She plays a lawyer, and she said, why is it that like people look at someone holding a gun and they see that weapon, but why is my blackness considered a weapon? And
Exactly.
that's the thing, like people see you as black and automatically see you as dangerous, and it's just like, why does it have to be? Because if you look at it historically, what is it that black people ever did to be demonstrated as dangerous? We were the ones that were stolen. We were the ones that were put
And
into hard labor. We were the ones that
mhm.
tried to fight for our rights. If you want to look at who's dangerous, like to me, like sometimes I'm fearful. Like when I see and I'm the one black person, I'm fearful because I'm like, who would stand up for me if something goes down?
Exactly. And their excuse is always like, oh, there are higher like rates of crime in the black population. First of all, I want to let
Because
you
people are
know,
fighting to
you
survive
came,
in the slums that you
you
gave us.
came, you brought these people in here as slaves, right? You enslaved them, you mistreated them, you did everything to them. Then you're like, okay, I'll give them freedom, but they're not going to gain access to the same opportunities we have. They're not going to be able to the same schools that we go to. Okay, so they, did themselves. They worked them the blue collar jobs or whatever. And after that, you said, okay, separate but equal. Okay, they'd have the whole separate but equal thing. which we all
Mm-hmm.
know that was not equal because Black people weren't able to gain access against bank loans to start businesses. They weren't able to actually get into like the schools they wanted to go to. Like those were already obstacles. They weren't able to do it, like they weren't able to freely build like wealth within their community and freely build themselves and acquire like these education and everything. So of course there are higher rates of poverty. I'm not saying that, oh, like everyone's poor, but it's like they're trying to break free from all that oppression. First of all, of course there are higher rates of poverty within the Black community, and then places that have higher rates of poverty have higher crime rates. It's just common sense, but doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
everybody that is Black is a criminal, or everybody that is Black is from a poor, low income community or family without a father. That's what they like to use. Oh, no, Black people don't know who their fathers are. That's what they love saying. But it's like they were already at a disadvantage from the time they came to the US till, let's say, even till today. Let's say we think that we're really not free. So it's just like they're already, when your ancestors came to this country, they were already able to do whatever they wanted to do. So they were able to acquire land, they were able to acquire wealth, they were able to acquire like loans to start businesses. There were no obstacles for them. So of course it's not going to be the same anywhere else in the world. If you go to developing countries, there are higher poverty rates in those countries. So of course there are higher crime rates. If you go to like any developing country in the world, there are higher crime rates than developed countries because there are higher rates of poverty. It just makes sense. That's just how it is. So it's kind of like you mistreated these people. Now you're saying, how come they're not in the same level as us? How come they have higher crime rates than us? How come they're not getting the same education as us? But they were already at a disadvantage when they
Mm-hmm.
came. They didn't
Like
start
we're
on
at
an
a
equal
400-year
field.
disadvantage.
Exactly. They didn't start at equal playing fields. If they okay, it
Like
would be
if they
different.
want to do it, then I'm like level the playing field. I want,
Mhm.
and I'm like, because
Exactly.
there was this there like if you want to do that, because what I love is there's this woman, Miss Jane Elliott, who this woman, I'm like, I want to be best friends with her 100%. She's a white woman who
Hmm.
like works on educating people about systematic racism from as long as anyone can remember. And what she said is she went to an audience of white people and said, "Raise your hand if you want to be treated the way black people are treated." Not one white soul
Hmm.
raised their hand. And she said, "So what this is telling me is that not only you know what is going on with black people, but you don't even want to be treated the same way. Because honestly, if you go to a group of black people and say, raise your hand if you want to be treated the way white people are treated, all of them would raise their hands because they know how white people are treated better and they want to be treated that way. So people
It
are
feels
aware of it. It's just like, I think honestly, the whole topic of, oh, okay, if people don't want to, like, people would, like, I understand it's uncomfortable. White people would rather remain silent than
hmm
say the wrong thing. And I get that. That's honest. I'd rather you say that to me. I get that. But if you stay silent and you don't even use your privilege at all, because you know what, the same way black people, I'm going to say we need equal burdens. Then black people have the burden of always having to prove themselves. Well, you know what, white people, you have the burden of using your privilege because you were given it
exactly.
and you have all these things. Now you need to use your privilege, can be your burden. You need to use that to help others.
It's funny that you're saying that none of them actually rose their hands because when I read like articles and comments, I see a whole different side of things. Like white people be like, well, black people get like state aid, they get like affirmative action, they get free food, free healthcare, free this and that, and we don't get to have that. We wish we even had half of what black people are getting.
I think that's very funny because with what everything that happened with COVID, they highlighted the fact that the majority of people who were on unemployment and receiving welfare checks were white. So I'm like,
Exactly.
if you really think about it, I'm like, so on top of that, you already have your natural privilege. And then on
And
top of that, you're receiving more welfare checks. So my black person's tax dollars are going to
mhm.
paying for a privileged person. And I'm like, so
It,
really, who does have it equally? Because the funny thing is, everything that a black person has, a white person already has or can easily get. Everything that a
mhm.
white person has, a black person has to work like 100 times as hard, and even then, a small percentage get that.
Yeah. And it's funny that they're always denying this privilege. Like, oh, I work hard. I do this for my children. We have a two-parent household. Therefore, I don't believe in white privilege. I'm like, that's not what a white privilege means.
And that's the thing. It's not to say like, and that's the thing. And when we say they, we're not talking about like, oh, all white people are this way. Because I mean, as a testament to my research, like the team I work with, these are people that like. I mean, granted, some of them are like higher up and they're like in the 1% for real. But like, they're not. They use their privilege for good, and on top of that, they don't even view themselves as above. Like, they really do believe in equality, 100%.
Hmm.
A
Yeah.
hundredfold. But then when you look at it, it's not to say that white people won't suffer, but you have to look at the general population. What
Hmm.
like white people suffering, they do suffer. Every race, every human being suffers. That's not to
Hmm.
denounce that. What it is
Hmm.
that when you see like a whole group of people somehow always stay at the bottom, why is that? And if people don't want to sit there,
Exactly.
and that's why I'm like, I'm not having those conversations to discuss things like that. I refuse
Are
to have
people
that. If you're
are
not like minded with me and seeing that, then we can't talk.
like are people in your research environments, are people are aware of their privilege? It's not like they're racist or anything, but it's just like I think a lot of people are unaware of their privilege. It's not because they're prejudiced.
I think
They're just
I'm going to be
unaware that
honest
it
with you,
exists.
and that's one of those things. And that's where it's almost like you have to define. There's like racist people, there's ignorant, and then there's ignorance. But then
Hmm.
I think if you're unaware, to me, that's ignorance.
Yeah,
But
that's ignorant. That's not.
there's two sides of ignorance. But
Yeah,
I feel like
that's not
if no
racist.
matter what, exactly, if you're ignorant, like if you legitimately don't know, I
Hmm.
think you're, to me, that's you're kind of stupid, honestly, because if you don't know, like how are you not, to me, how are you not aware of what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
even if you have all white friends, how can you not turn on the news and see what's going on? That
Yeah.
doesn't
I
make
think.
sense to me. Like, unless you live in a bubble, the only exception would be like basically people who don't have a TV, don't interact with anyone outside of their community. That's the only people. But if you are in an environment, if you're, first off, if you're in a city, you should definitely be aware. If you
Yeah.
work with people, you should be aware. If you have a TV, you should be aware. Like, that doesn't, like, to me, that doesn't make sense. Maybe they don't understand the gravity, like they don't realize how many times black people are looked at and stopped. Maybe they don't understand like what it's like to walk in a black person's shoes. But I'm
Yeah. I
like,
don't. I think.
there's certain aspects, but I'm like, I think ignorance at this point in time, in as this point in 2020, if you are still ignorant, to me, I'm like, at that point, I'm going to group you in with racist, because it's because you don't want to learn, because you
Yeah.
do not care.
And let me explain. There are different types of like quote unquote white privilege. Like, for example, white privilege doesn't mean that, oh, you've worked hard for whatever you've gotten. There are different types of like
Mm-hmm.
you being privileged because you're white. For example, there's this YouTuber that I watch that is a doctor, right? Whenever she wears her scrub and goes into a patient's room, the patients automatically assume that she's the CNA. They automatically assume that she's coming to clean the room. They don't see her as a doctor. There's already these assumptions that they have about her because of the color of her skin. But when her coworkers go into the same room and they're white, they automatically think, oh, that is the doctor. That's an example of white privilege. People don't have assumptions. They don't have those like negative like stereotypes of, oh yeah, she must be the CNA, or she must be, the cleaner or something like that. They already see you as, oh, someone who's like higher up, you know. For example, there's someone else that he says when he goes to work, he wears suit, he looks fine and everything. Once he wears a hoodie and runs around his neighborhood, he gets stares because of the color of his skin. People
Mm,
automatically assume that he doesn't belong there. And this is like a big CEO of like a major company. But once he wears
that's
that hoodie to
difficult.
go for a jog around his neighborhood, he gets stares. He gets like people start saying, okay, who is this one? Why is he in our neighborhood? And then there's this other
Wow.
one black surgeon. I think our university just sent us an email about her. where she's a surgeon. She drives a Porsche. She's African American. She drives a Porsche, and when police actually stop her to ask her for IDs, especially when she's going into her gated community, like they always ask her for an ID, but they don't ask everyone else for an ID because of the car that she's driving, and they don't think that she looks like the type of person that would be living in such an affluent neighborhood. That's an
Mm,
example of white privilege, that you can go into these affluent neighborhoods, you can drive whichever car you want without people giving you the side eye. Or you
uh,
can wear your hair when you go to interviews. You don't have to care about your hair or the color of your skin. You can just walk into that interview and be your true self, and then you get the individuality clause. Black people don't always get the individuality clause. If one black person does something, it reflects on all of us. They're like, oh,
does.
that's how
And
they
it's
are.
true.
That's how they are. That's how they behave. And then they're always saying that, oh, black people, like they don't work hard, they're lazy, they're this and that. But the reason why you're thinking that way is because all you see on TV are the black people who are committing crime, who are being jailed, who are doing all these stuff. But people wouldn't go to a black person who's successful and say, so how do you live your life? Let me show you on TV. Oh, you're a surgeon. Oh, you're this and that. Oh, you actually like you have you're married, you have kids, and you have good professional jobs. That's not going to make television. But what is going to make television is those who are like quote unquote thugs, or those who are selling drugs, or those who are committing crime. That's what people see on TV, and that's what they assume about us. It's going to be boring to show someone that is going to work, a black person going to work day in and day out, taking care of the family. Who wants to watch that? People want to watch negative stuff on TV. And unfortunately, that's what they portray us as on TV. And that's what people automatically think we are. Because
Mm,
where I lived in Georgia, it's funny because like I'm just hearing about this whole like, oh, black people don't come from two-parent households, or this and that, they're lazy, they don't want to work hard. Because where I lived in a really mixed neighborhood, and I most black people that were in my neighborhood were African Americans. They came from two-parent households. Their parents had good jobs, like they had really, really good jobs, and they had a good family unit, and they were really hardworking. Even in my high school, black people were so hardworking, like just like everyone else. I never had this thing in my mind where I'm like, oh my God, like black people are not working hard, or oh my God, they come from a single parent household. It's only when I came here or and I started, hearing all these things that I'm like, oh, what? Like, are you serious? Because that's not what I was exposed to, you know?
yeah, it's
So it's that it's
different.
just like I think what the media does. I remember when I was watching Chimamanda's. She's actually a Nigerian author, and she was giving this speech about the single story. And I think what the media does is they tell the single story. It doesn't necessarily mean that the story is not true. It means that it's incomplete. For example, when she came to the U.S., everybody in the US said that, oh, you came from Africa. Oh, you guys must have had animals and lived in huts. Or did you guys even have food to eat? But she's saying that it's not like that's incorrect, because there are some people that do not have food, that do live in huts, but that's the single story, and you're just hearing one side of the story. And I think because people just run with just the single story and then assume it to be true for everyone within that group. You get?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, but then unfortunately for us as black people, a lot of people just see us as just like one. We don't get the individuality clause. So that's the problem too.
No,
Like that's where all these assumptions come from. And not everyone is the same. But let's
that's the
say
thing.
this is
People look to TV shows to have a
mhm,
representation of minorities, and
of
then
minorities.
while minorities look at the news to have a representation of how people really are.
Imagine the outrage if all these mass shootings were done by black people. Imagine the
Mm,
outrage.
we'd be
Like it
gone.
would never be the same. I'm telling you, like they probably would have made a law for us to all go back to Africa. Like that's how bad it would have been. Like
We'd be
imagine if it was
dragged out of
black
our
people doing
homes.
it. We would have been gone. But because
Citizenship
white people
revoked.
exactly it's because white people get the individuality clause. and that's it. That's why I'm like, as sad as it, I'm just glad it wasn't like it's not mostly black people because like we would have gotten so much hate if this was us.
Yeah, it's tough. But we've unpacked a lot. I'd like to
Yeah.
know what everyone else is thinking as well. So definitely leave something in the comments and let us know what you think. Thank you for watching.